Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the Isle of the Crimson Skull playing as Norsca against the High Elves. And the reason I'm casting this battle is mostly because of the cheese, and kind of want to go over some tips and tricks to counteract cheese strats of this sort, which you may often run into and can be pretty annoying and frustrating and difficult to deal with, especially for a faction like Norsca, which isn't the best kitted out to deal with this sort of stuff. Now, going into this matchup, I kind of anticipated that my opponent was going to do one of a few different builds. One, go very heavy on cavalry and try to kite me down that way. Otherwise, go super heavy into like a Phoenix Guard bunker, camp and just sit tight and try to heal through, especially with Alariel. And then, honestly, some sort of monster or foot kiting, that sort of stuff. Some sort of monster play, something you kind of anticipate. So going into this, I decided to make a build that could hopefully counter most of that. Now, for my lord, I did bring Wulfric the Wanderer, who is here somewhere. I can't find him. He's got most of his kit. He's mounted on a chariot. I didn't want the Mammoth because the Mammoth is a huge target. So if your opponent goes super heavy on shooting, as my opponent did here, but even if your opponent, say, brings a few Sisters of Avalorn or Leader Numer Archers or something like that, you're not necessarily going to be able to zone them away super well, but they're going to melt a Mammoth, whereas it's much harder to hit a maneuvering chariot. He also does have the benefit, of course, of Foe Seeker. He's got the benefit of Sea Fang, Fight or Die, and Hunter of Champions. Alongside that, Shaman Sorcerer of Metal, as well as Shaman Sorcerer of Death. This does give you the Plague of Rust, as well as Spear Leech. And I kind of figured the Spear Leech could help me against single models or cavalry, whereas Plague of Rust would help me if I needed to chip down a specific unit with either my Berserkers or with my Marauder Horsemen. I figured that would be incredibly useful. For my front line, it is 2 units of Berserkers, as well as the Brutes of the Hound in the center, and then 2 units of Marauders on either flank. Of course, the Marauders are not going to hold super well, but I wanted to go fairly cheap on the infantry, and I figured Berserkers would trade okay with Phoenix Guard if I gave them enough buffs. If I hit kind of distracting the Phoenix Guard and debuffing them, especially with Shaman Sorcerer of Metal, I could potentially melt through them that way, and they can mulch through cheaper infantry really effectively. They won't rout that easily, all that good stuff. I kind of figured. And if my opponent brought a bunch of shooting, well, I had a whole army built to counter that. So to counter my opponent's potential skirmishing play, whether cavalry or otherwise, or even if he did just bring heavy cav, I brought a bunch of horsemen and horsemasters. So there's 3 units of horsemasters here, 2 Marauder horsemen, and then 2 Norscan Ice Wolves, which are basically a light cav, for lack of a better word. They're basically a light cavalry unit. And then the Beasts of Tashanar, who are a regiment of renowned Norscan Warhounds, who do have Frenzy, Anti-Large, and 50% missile resist, which is not shown here. But regardless, my opponent went with a super cheesy build, and he's got 5 Shadow Warriors, Alariel on her Eagle with Banishment, Earthblood, Star of Avalorn. She actually does have, surprisingly enough, and this is not something I would recommend, she does have the Stave of Avalorn, Arcane Conduit, Shield of Sapphire, which is good, Life Bloom, of course, very good, a Moon Dragon, Star Dragon, of course, very good against the relatively low leadership of Norsca, and then a Froststar Phoenix. So a whole bunch of sort of annoying Fear and Terror bombs, debuffs, potential breath attack, breath harass, backed up by a hell of a lot of shooting. So what I immediately do is I immediately set these guys, I lock them into a control group, set them onto melee, and immediately just charge full. We're going all in, guys. We're going ham. You can see my full mobile contingent here pushing it. I figure that if my opponent gets bogged down, we're going to be able to hit them with Wulfric and the Sorcerers and really debuff them. My opponent obviously doesn't want to get bogged down with all these flyers. He does clip my Marauder Horsemasters in it, but now they're getting into melee. We are actually going to have one of our units routes there, one of our Marauder Horsemen. But these Marauder Horsemen are getting into these Shadow Warriors who are not actually trying to fight them. They're trying to keep running away and fight and shoot. But now, the first unit of Shadow Warriors is down. The second unit here getting intercepted by the Wolves, and the Chariots are going to be able to keep pushing through. And my opponent, if he dives down right now, he's going to find himself in a bit of a grim position, because I'm going to be able to surround him with my ground troops, debuff him, hit him with spells, and potentially surround him with infantry too. So the Froststar Phoenix here getting a little cheeky. You can see the Moon Dragon there melting some of these troops. But in the meantime, the first unit of Shadow Warriors has shattered. This second unit of Shadow Warriors is now caught by Wolves and is getting pursued by Horsemasters. And Wulfric and company keeps chasing, and you can see we've actually debuffed the Froststar Phoenix here with a Plague of Rust, trying to hit it, and then we hit him with a Spear Leech, and we just keep pushing on. And the pursuit keeps going. We're just trying to shatter these Shadow Warriors. The other important thing is that if I can break all these ground units, if I can break the Shadow Warriors, if I can break all of them, my opponent is then going to have to come down and fight me. Air units, of course, will be suffering leadership losses if they stay up in the air without any ground units. So the Beast of Tashanar here getting in. You can see a Banishment does go down and melts a few troops there, but I don't really care. I'm trying to keep these guys moving, but they keep stopping. I think they're losing their attack orders because some of the units they were supposed to attack were destroyed. But despite the breath attacks kind of being spammed, they're just not doing enough damage. The Horse Masters are getting in there, the Shadow Warriors are getting overrun, and their leadership is breaking. My opponent isn't really committing here because he's a little afraid, of course, that if he dives down, I'm immediately going to pounce. I'm going to swing around with all these troops, hit him with Spear Leeches, hit him with debuffs, and this infantry is all collapsing, and he's got all these Marauder Horsemen coming in to pound him with damage. And at this point, you can see the Shadow Warriors down to 10 models here, routing. These guys down to 23. This unit over here fleeing, but this is where I make a huge critical mistake. Wolfric getting way overextended in the trees, which means my opponent's going to be able to dive down with these flyers. And Wolfric on his chariot, not exactly the most impressive melee stat-wise. He's going to get dove upon. He has no way of saving himself, and he is going to go down pretty horribly. He gets hit by that flying double tap. If some of you guys don't know what that is, it's flyers for some reason hit basically twice when they land a charge. We do get a Spear Leaf in against the Star Dragon, though. We're going to melt it a little bit. But unfortunately, Wolfric is completely forced to rout. He gets terror routed, and that is going to be it for him. But my opponent at this point, suffering pretty badly. The Marauder Berserkers here actually rampage out of control. I'm actually baiting him out of the Star of Avalorn by pressuring these Shadow Warriors, who is the last sort of lifeline to stay up in the air and be able to kite and be a pain in the rear that way. So, well, unfortunately, though, I'm going to lose my Shaman Sorcerers here. I really do kind of wish I'd simply brought like a Final Transmutation to nuke this huge blob here, but what can you do? We're going to lose both Shamans here, which really sucks, which means my entire leadership core is gone. But for my opponent, his Shadow Warriors are now shattered. They are going to start fleeing from the field. We don't have to pursue them. We can simply let them run. And now I'm going to start turning away, escaping this banishment. Although it does melt a few of my troops there, unfortunately. We're going to be able to escape largely. My opponent is now at a very grim position. Certainly he does have Fear and Terror. Certainly I do have no leadership. But he needs to land on the ground. And one of the really brutal things right now is that most of his guys, especially his dragons, are just slow. So if I kite away with my horsemen, there's a very good chance I can simply kite away with the dogs and hounds and potentially drag this match out to something of a to him suffering leadership losses. He's only got 68 leadership there. He's got 40 leadership there. These guys are suffering some serious leadership penalties. And now we're going to commit here into this brawl with our infantry. Marauder Berserkers have monstrous leadership. They don't really care too much about these guys' Fear and Terror. Unfortunately, the horsemen here not really able to get great shots in. They were still in melee mode, so they were struggling a little bit to get in there and fight. But nonetheless, the Berserkers here melting down this Frosted Phoenix. They are melting down the Star Dragon even. He's only got 80 armor, so Berserkers, especially as they get voided up slowly but surely, are just going to do so much work. Another breath attack does go down, but we are in the trees, which is kind of benefiting me. And we're going to start chipping away at these guys. We get some javelins in there. We've got our hounds sort of opportunistically sitting around the periphery. These guys still not firing. I'm not entirely sure why. They're not even blocked. I was trying to get them to shoot at the Moon Dragon because he's really low and only has 50 armor. But it's a bit of a pit fight. So we're going to fast forward here a little bit. You can see these guys wavering just from being this close to these guys. But we are going to start lobbing some javelins in there. You can see they're going to start doing a little bit of chip damage to the Star Dragon, Moon Dragon. You can see it's forced to retreat there, forced to pull back. And my opponent is now going to commit a Lariel, trying to force me off and prevent me from just poking him with javelins. But as Lariel does push out, she does drop that Star of Avalorn here, healing these guys up. But we have turned on fire at will. And before she can turn around and escape, the puppies are going to jump on her. And you can see, of course, she's being frostbitten now, down to 71 speed. Beasts of Tashnar in there with their 40, I think they've got like 54 melee attack and like close to 40 weapon strength with their crazy bonus for Lars. I think it's 14. And they're just tearing Alariel to shreds here. She only has 30 armor, 47 melee defense, which is just completely being bypassed because she's surrounded. It's just being hit from all angles. Honestly, Frosthounds are not bad either. They've got very solid, very respectable melee attack and weapon strength especially. So Lariel, he's going to go down. That is going to be a game for my opponent at this point. He's not going to be able to stick around. The Star Dragon here, the last thing sticking around, but we're now going to pounce on him with all our dogs. It's just collapsing. He's not going to be able to do the damage he needs to break me. We still have a decent chunk of ammo on our Marauder Horsemen, who do have a respectable amount of AP. That damage is worth mentioning. And now, you can see some of them are diving in because they're out of ammo, but still, these guys do have some ammo. These guys have some ammo. And the Star Dragon here is going to be forced to rout, and that is going to be a game for my opponent. So, kite builds, they're very annoying. They can be very difficult to deal with. They can be really frustrating to play against. And honestly, I do wish CA would take some steps to mitigate pure kite builds, or of this nature, where you just got a bunch of annoying flyers comboed with a bunch of shooting that they kind of screen out for. But you can definitely counter it, even as Norsca, which is a faction that struggles against this. I think Norsca is one of the worst factions against kite builds. Is this necessarily the best comp? Not necessarily. I kind of had to throw this together in my rush because my opponent kind of readied up immediately. He probably had this build ready to go, thinking he's going to cheese his way to a win. But as far as this comp goes, like you can bring a build that can counter other normal builds, and still have the options and opportunities to counteract something like a annoying cheese build. It can be difficult. I think some factions are really not well kitted out to counter them. Norsca is definitely, I think, a prime example of this. But with Marauder Horsemen, you can sort of pressure your opponent. Keep in mind, Marauder Horsemen, they can fire on the move, so if your opponent tries to bring a Leader Reavers, you can close on them. You can potentially, if you've got some support in tow, the Leader Reavers can't just turn into you and try to fight you. Especially if you've got Beast of Tasharon in there. It's very difficult for Leader Reavers to get in the fight. If you've got this pressure with the Marauder Horsemen, and the nice thing is that you do stuff tools. Say if my opponent went with a bunch of Phoenix Guard, I still had all of these guys to counteract all that Phoenix Guard. I could still cycle charge them. I could still debuff them with and let the Brutes of the Hound do some work. I could still shoot them down with javelins over time and just debuff their armor, that sort of stuff. I had options. I had different opportunities for how I could play this game out. If my opponent had gone with a heavy cav build, once again, I could have sort of fallen back, let the infantry unfortunately soak up some damage, but then sort of kited them. Chariots, actually, heroic chariots don't do that terrible against cav. Debuff them, use my Spirit Leech from the Sorcerer, use the Hounds and the Javelin play to whittle them down. Say my opponent, if you bring about like 2 Dragon Princes, you're not likely to see a huge amount of Dragon Prince play, I think, in this matchup. It's a very good chance you're going to see like 2, maybe even 3, but probably no more than that. And I think in that situation, you can, the Hounds and the pressure from the Marauder Horsemen, you can basically clock one unit with Spirit Leech, hit another one with an armor debuff, and then whittle it down with just mass damage, and you can potentially win that way. If my opponent had gone from just a single hero and didn't have this huge goon squad, Wulfric's Hunter of Champions would also come into more play. I'm not saying this is necessarily the most optimal build. Like I said, I threw this together really quickly on a sort of last-ditch effort. But this sort of build can work, and it gives you an opportunity, some counterplay to everything. My opponent, even with some good focus fire, was only able to rout 1 unit of horsemen before they gap closed. And by the time I was on top of him, once I was on top of him, his Shadow Warriors, even with a few of them being relatively safe initially, just weren't able to cut and run. And I had just so much mobility. I had 11 mobile units here. They could just pressure him. And similar builds are okay against, I'd say it's less good against Wood Elves for the simple reason they've got AP projectiles. So you probably don't want you'll probably want more, in my opinion, Skin Wolves and less Wulfric and Chariots in that situation, because you don't need to counter heavy infantry there. You obviously, the Chariot is just a huge, easy target for Praevan Threma, so I personally prefer Wulfric just either on foot or maybe a horse. Definitely you can do a very high mobility, and I think it can work. So I do understand that was a bit ranty. Regardless, I did want to cast this match for you guys. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you found it informative and perhaps helps you guys out, because in my opinion, this is a really cruddy matchup in some ways from Norsca. If you get caught by a Kite build, in my experience, Norsca kind of struggles with Kite builds. So I hope it helps if you guys struggle. If you don't, well, oh well. Hopefully you were entertained. Good game to my opponent, Sunderhill here. And if you guys have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, do not hesitate to post them. I do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.